Welcome to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live, where we offer the news, weather, traffic, information, and entertainment our drivers want and need. I'm your host, Shelley Johnson. No one works harder than our professional drivers. Oftentimes, they work very hard in life to succeed and fulfill their dreams. They always want to do that. That's what people want to do. But sometimes the roadblocks they encounter are actually created in their minds. Dr. FriedemannSchaub is the author of The Empowerment Solution, 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. He's a physician, researcher, personal development coach, and also the author of the award-winning book, The Fear and Anxiety Solution. His research and advice have been featured in many publications, including Nature Medicine, Oprah Magazine, Huffington Post, Reader's Digest, Teen Vogue, and Shape. He's also the host of the Empowerment Solutions podcast. We have Dr. Friedemann with us today to talk about his amazing insight. Welcome, Dr. Friedemann. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I thought before we discuss your amazing research and what you found out about the subconscious mind, I wanted you to maybe tell our listeners a little bit about your background.
Well, my background is not necessarily something I thought I would end up where I'm now, because I started as a physician and, felt like that medicine was what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, until one day I noticed more and more stress, more and more anxiety, and also panic attacks. And there was at some point this little voice in my head that said, you know what? Are you sure you want to do this for another 25 to 30 years? And that was in my life. Now, I had anxiety already as a child, and that just was a companion for many years. But these panic attacks were new, and I definitely listened. And I took some time, which was mandatory, to go into research. So I went to Washington, Seattle, and did some research in molecular biology, and I loved it. It was just such a game changer, because in medicine, I always learned about how the body is fallible and how we are basically just, works in progress, and we need doctors to fix us. And they, in this basic research, I saw us humans from a different light, that we have really such an amazing self-healing power. Each cell is equipped to adapt and evolve and respond. And so I decided to stay in research and focused in molecular biology and did my PhD in that. And after a while, I realized, I think I want to help people. I want to help people to harness this power from within, that what somehow we are not either believing in or we are giving up on. And I really got interested in the mind, and how the mind, especially our thoughts, our emotions, are highly responsible for our well-being and also for our physical well-being. And for me, the question was, what about our mind can help us to stay healthy and to ultimately heal? And this is when I got interested in this deeper part of the mind. And some of you listeners may have heard about the subconscious. So there is the conscious mind, this intellectual part of the mind, and then there is this deeper part that really, if you believe it or not, does 70 to 80% of our daily activities. And if you're driving right now and listening, and you're maybe just, really focused on what you're hearing, who does the driving? I mean, how often are we not really totally there, but somehow the car stops, somehow we're keeping on the road, or you're home brushing your teeth, but in your head, you're already on the road. And who does the teeth brushing? Those automatic patterns and many more things are the subconscious mind's task. And it's a very, very powerful aspect of us. And I believe that's a power that's untapped, we can harness.
Interesting. What is the exact definition of the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind?
Well, the definition is basically, made by its task. So the conscious mind is you could imagine it a little bit like iceberg analogy. So the conscious mind is this peak that, you can see out of the water, and the subconscious is this massive part of of the mind that's underwater that we don't really see, but it is there. And the tasks of the conscious mind, planning and rational thinking and also all the logic, are coming from that conscious place. But the subconscious is responsible for our emotions, which we kind of know because most of our emotions don't seem to make sense. You wake up with a bad hair day, or all of a sudden you have some anxiety, you don't even know where it comes from. Or, you're just not able to stop it with logic. It just keeps on coming. So that's the subconscious. The subconscious does our memories. If I would ask you to think about the bedroom you grew up in, well, right now you're thinking about it, but you haven't thought about it before. Where was that memory? Well, it's somewhere in this big library of the subconscious, and you can pull out those memories, or they come spontaneously, and that's again another job of the subconscious. And then there are also the beliefs, our whole belief system, our values, all those things are anchored in the subconscious. And so it does a lot of things under the surface, but really how we feel and how we act in life is largely determined by the matrix of our subconscious.
I have heard when people dream at night, a lot of it is the subconscious mind sorting through the day. Is that correct?
Very much so. Very much so. It's a little bit like getting out the garbage, but sometimes we have dreams that are not really directly related to the day, right? I had dreams where I was flying. There, dreams of when we were chased, things that we don't really have a direct experience with. So those dreams are more metaphorical, where you would say the subconscious tells you a theme and it tells you a story. Maybe when you're chased, you're feeling in general that there is always pressure, or you feel like, you have done something and you're afraid of being found out. And when, I'm flying, it certainly was a great dream of freedom and wanting to have more freedom, but not having it at that time. So we can really interpret the dreams also and get more understanding of what the subconscious is grappling with and what it...
Which is very important. Are you still with us, Dr. Friedemann?
I'm still here, yes.
Okay,
I'm here.
You had to cut out there, so I wanted to make sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm here.
I know some people will say when they have dreams, they have this sensation of falling, or they'll go from room to room and the lights don't work and they're being chased, like you had talked about. Are all of these things the subconscious trying to make sense of things?
I mean, I do also have dreams where I literally dream of a show I just watched before. You watch a zombie show and all of a sudden you dream of zombies. So that's not necessarily the subconscious giving us a metaphorical meaning. But often the dreams that you describe, the falling, or some people describe that they lose teeth. And losing teeth is a very classic dream of losing something that's important to you. It can be a loved one, it can be a job, but it's really going to the core, because when we lose teeth in our dream, we feel very powerless. And that sense of powerlessness is what the subconscious in those images describes. Or, how many times have we dreamt, I don't know you, but I'm sure some of your listeners, of being naked in public, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I don't have my pants on. I mean, that is a dream also of being exposed, feeling very vulnerable. Sure. And the subconscious shows that.
Is there a particular place in the mind, have scientists determined where the subconscious mind is, or is it throughout the brain?
Well, there is a difference between the mind and the brain. And I like this description that I read the other day, which basically says the mind is where you would say, the intentions come from, where the consciousness is, where, we can also, and the brain is almost like the executor of that. The brain is what makes things then happen. It's a little bit like the analogy of the body and the brain. So the brain says, hey, move forward, and then the legs are moving forward. The mind says, let's go into this direction in life, or let's fall in love with this person. And then the brain is reacting with, releasing of these endocrines and so on. So I think we cannot really anatomically find the place where the mind is. And maybe we shouldn't. This is just not something that can be explained with neurons and pathways. Of course, they have found in neuroscience areas where anxiety comes from and so on. But I think that's always the question, what's a chicken and the egg? And
Sure.
for me, the mind is beyond an anatomy of a person.
It's rather interesting. We're always learning new things about the human brain and the mind.
Right.
It's really a miraculous organism when you think about it, all of the things it processes at any given time. And activating the healing power of your subconscious mind. This is an interesting topic, and I think it's something that our drivers definitely can benefit from. We do have to go to break here, Dr. Friedemann. I'm Shelley Johnson on the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm talking with Dr. Friedemann. He's the author of The Empowerment Solution. Stay tuned for more coming up right here on tncradio.live. The Truckers Network helps professional drivers save money and makes their lives easier. We were created for drivers by a commercial driver. We know the industry and driver needs. A Truckers Network membership offers exclusive discounts through our trusted partners on things like truck care, truck parking, tires, oil changes, fuel additives, fitness, roadside assistance, first aid kits, driver training, and a whole lot more. Start saving today. Check us out at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. That's app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The trucking industry keeps America running thanks to the 3.36 million professional truck drivers who deliver everyday goods to 80% of American communities who rely on trucking for that last mile. The industry represents a diverse group with nearly half of drivers at 42% as minorities. Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, educates the public on the essentiality of trucking by telling the story of trucking and its positive impact on our economy, communities, and lives. Learn how you can join the industry movement by visiting truckingmovesamerica.com. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson, and I'm talking with Dr. Friedemann, who's the author of The Empowerment Solution. It's really quite fascinating here. The power, the healing power of your subconscious mind that can accelerate change and growth and eliminate anxiety, depression, stress. This is fascinating. How does all of this work?
Well, I mean, we have to dissect it a little bit in regards to what we are actually using our mind for. Let's say, for example, anxiety, right? So you're dealing with your job, or you have stress financially, or you are maybe having problems at home. It brings up a lot of anxiety. Now, anxiety is something that, the subconscious is pretty much putting out there to warn you. I mean, we have had anxiety probably when we were living in caves and dealing with, big beasts with great teeth. We had to always be on guard, and anxiety is, a protective mechanism. Now, whenever something feels somehow out of whack, we are in danger, the subconscious sends out these signals for us to, to make sure that we are okay. Now, what happens next is that we go into behavioral patterns. And these behavioral patterns is what the empowerment solution describes, which basically, when we go into those, I call them survival modes. Let's say, for example, you have problems with your boss and you're, getting anxious. And so your response may be that you're starting to please this person and that you're starting to overgive or over promise because you want to make sure that this person is okay with you. Or another example is that you are feeling very uncomfortable sharing how you feel, or more, showing more your vulnerable side, or the things that, you really struggle with. And so you're hiding that. It makes you anxious to open up. It makes you anxious to talk about what's really bothering you. And that's an avoidance mode. And so there are different modes we do in response to feeling uncomfortable, feeling anxious, feeling stressed. And the problem with these modes is that they're like band-aids on a big wound. They're not really fixing it. They're only helping us in the moment to feel a little bit more comfortable. But the more we are hiding and the more we are pleasing or over-pleasing, the more we are dependent on how other people react. And the more we are feeling kind of, disconnected almost from ourselves. Because in the end, we need other people either to, not really ask us any questions, or we need other people to be pleased with us or give us some approval in order for us to feel okay. Mm-hmm. And that is where so many people are struggling with that survival pattern of avoidance or pleasing that, it only creates more anxiety. And we all know when we have a lot of anxiety, eventually it exhausts us. And that is one of the reasons why anxiety can also lead to depression. So we have to be aware of not just the anxiety as the issue, but really also how we respond to it with these patterns and how to nip them in the bud, how to change those patterns and find more empowering ways to deal with our emotions.
These survival patterns, is that just innate to the human condition, or is it something that we develop through childhood?
It's actually something we develop through childhood. And obviously there are these patterns that are innate to human condition because they repeat themselves over and over again. So, let's say one of those patterns is the pattern of procrastination. I don't know if there is a cat or a lion procrastinating. They may lay around, but when they need food, they go for it. They're not saying, tomorrow is another day. I'll be okay. Procrastination is very much a human condition, but it's also a survival pattern of avoiding failure, of avoiding discomfort. And so we are promising ourselves that we're going to take care of this tomorrow, next week, and then we don't do it, which creates only more anxiety, and we are feeling even more unsure of ourselves. It's a vicious cycle.
Well, certainly when you procrastinate, then you run out of time. So you're creating more stress to do something you didn't want to do to begin with.
Absolutely, very much. And we all know procrastination because most of us, or all of us, have done it. The problem is only when procrastination becomes your default setting. When you really feel like that you're sinking in deeper and deeper in this hole that you have been digging yourself with procrastination. And it's not only that there is a pile of stuff that you haven't dealt with. The bigger problem is that you don't believe yourself anymore. Because if someone would tell you, hey, I'm going to come tomorrow and deliver you this, or I'm going to paint your house next week, and that person doesn't show up after the second or third time, you just don't want to deal with this person anymore. But if you do it all the time to yourself, well, where do you go? You only got yourself. And if you don't believe yourself anymore, if you don't trust in your word, you're pretty much screwed. And that is a problem with anxiety, that all those patterns give you short-term relief, but they are creating long-term problems.
Now, I'm seeing that you've identified 6 common survival patterns that are really part of this whole process. What is that all about?
Well, the book aims basically for you to take your power back, because so many of us feel powerless these days. So many of us feel just that they are, the circumstances victim, that they don't really feel they are the owners of their life, the leaders of their life, and they feel lost. And so the book is really about how do you find your inner resources so that you can be in charge of your life again, in charge of not only your thoughts, but also your emotions, your beliefs, and your actions. And since most of those patterns are patterns that we fall into and give our power away through, I describe these 6 patterns as a pathway for you to become that authentic leader of your life. So the 6 patterns are the victim. So that's when we feel like the victim of our circumstances, the victim of our past, even the victim of our own emotions. We feel constantly somehow that life is done to us versus that we are creating our life or that life is for us. The second one is the invisibility pattern, and that's when we are hiding out. And it's so interesting because a lot of people feel like, oh yeah, I'm not really invisible because I'm boisterous, I'm loud, I have a lot to say, but in the end they are invisible, as I said before, because they are not really showing who they are. There's so many secrets, there are so many issues they are hiding from others that there is an invisibility. It's just a different kind of invisibility than the wallflower standing in the corner. And then there is the procrastination pattern. There is the chameleon pattern, which is a very interesting one where people ultimately always adjust to others to, get some kind of a sense of fitting in and pleasing and don't really know anymore who they are. Then there is a helper pattern. That's a typical caretaker, overgiver, always there for others, never taking care of themselves. And then there is the lover pattern, and that is the pattern where we are picking one person to be our savior or to be the person that makes us whole or the reason to be. And we are giving all the power to this one person, and we no longer focus on ourselves. We do what they want. We take the same hobbies. We give up on everything else. And unfortunately, often the people that are in that pattern are in abusive relationships and unhealthy relationships, codependent relationships. So all these patterns together are addressed, and I show ways on how to overcome them.
I don't think the average person realizes all of this is going on in their minds.
I know. But when you read the statistics, you also know that anxiety is a pandemic right now. I mean, literally, more and more people feel anxious, and not because we are only facing all these problems. They feel anxious because somehow they feel unsafe and insecure in themselves. I mean, I talk with so many young people that feel completely lost and anxious about the future and who they are and what they're supposed to do, and it's a big problem.
It really is. And I think it really came to the forefront after the pandemic, because the world just kind of was turned upside down and people really had to start dealing with some of these things. And then there was the isolation, and they had to look at themselves in the mirror every day. And I think it just was something they suddenly had to deal with, and they didn't know how to do it.
I totally agree. I agree. But, I was hoping that the pandemic would actually bring us closer to ourselves, because all of a sudden we were deprived of all these distractions and all the things we usually do to make us feel better and not have to sit with ourselves. But often people actually were not sure what to do with that stranger, who they are, not liking what they feel, not really being sure of now what. And I think it's still an opportunity. It just also means that we have to admit that we need help sometimes, that we need to look for answers. We cannot just run away from our problems, but really see them as opportunities. I think our issues, especially anxiety, when I look at myself, I had this massive anxiety for so many years, but at the end, it helped me to do what I'm doing now. I found myself through the anxiety. I found a greater purpose. And so a lot of our challenges, we just have to turn them around and make them into catalysts for us to really become better human beings.
I think the pandemic, because people had to suddenly deal with themselves, they weren't able to do all the busy stuff they had been doing, because I think they were running away from themselves. I mean, our world in the past 20 years, 15 anyway, has gotten so tremendously busy. People are always doing, and they're engaging electronically versus face to face. And when they were isolated, they had to deal with themselves. They didn't like themselves. So a lot of people engaged in other avoidance behaviors like drinking and drugs, because I believe there was some increase in that. So it's amazing how we run away from ourselves.
It is. And isn't it kind of, sad when you think about it that the one person that you are spending the rest of your life with is the one person you don't really want to spend time with? It doesn't really make sense. So we have to eventually get closer to ourselves. We have to eventually befriend who we are. And that's the thing that I find so interesting. It's like if life is a journey and, ultimately it is about discovering all the things that we can do and the treasures that are inside of us, and the life just becomes much more meaningful if we're only in this survival mode where we're just slugging along and kind of distracting ourselves to feel a bit better. Well, in the end, we cannot wait for it to be over, and that's, I think, a huge waste.
Sure, that you really aren't living life to its fullest. No doubt about that. Well, we definitely want to get into some more of your insight here, Dr. Friedemann. You have some tremendous information that I think that our drivers can definitely benefit from. I'm talking with Dr. FriedemannSchaub. He's the author of The Empowerment Solution. We're talking about the power of the subconscious mind. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. TNCradio.live is proud to carry the Steve Summers Overnight Drive Show. TNCradio.live is dedicated to commercial drivers. We offer the news, traffic, and weather you need, and the entertainment, sports, talk, music, and celebrity interviews you want to hear 24/7. We have original shows and trucker podcasts that feature some of your favorites, like Ice Road Alex Debogorski and America's Truckin' Sweetheart Marcia Campbell. TNCradio.live is convenient and designed for professional drivers. The best part is we're free, and you can listen anywhere you are on the road. With just one tap, you can tune into Steve Summers and us right on your phone. Simply download our app by going to app.tncradio.live. That's app.tncradio.live. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson, and I'm talking with Dr. FriedemannSchaub. He's the author of The Empowerment Solution. We're talking about the subconscious mind, the different patterns we engage in. And it's interesting, Dr. Friedemann, you talk about how people can throw off the shackles of the self-sabotaging patterns that we discussed in the previous segment and actually become self-empowered. How does all of that work?
Well, there are 6 keys ultimately to self-empowerment. And I wish someone would have told me those keys when I was little and when I felt pretty disempowered. And those keys are self-responsibility. And self-responsibility basically means that you are throwing off the shackle of being a victim and realizing whatever happens in your life, whatever other people have been doing to you, you are not the victim of the circumstances, and you're not defined by what was done to you, but you're defined by what you do with it and how you grow from it and what lessons you're taking from it. And ultimately, it's a responsibility over your past. You are not choosing to make the past simply what's going to determine your future. You're choosing to take responsibility from the things that didn't work out, that hurt, that were maybe disappointing, or the betrayal you experienced, and you learn from it and you let go of the past. And there's a whole process in that. And then with this new learning under your belt, you move on, you move forward. And then there is self-compassion. It's a very important tool, which most of us can learn a little bit more from. Then there is self-reliance, which is the key that turns around the procrastination. Self-awareness is the chameleon key. Self-commitment is the key that turns around the helper pattern, the overgiving pattern. And self-love. I mean, what a concept, right? I mean, often we hear like, you should love yourself. But in the end, does anyone explain us how to do it? Do we really know what that means? And so there are also certain steps you can take. And self-love is not a a weakness. And it's not meaning like, oh, I'm so in love with myself, I become a narcissist. It's simply that what I describe as coming home to yourself, the place where you actually feel good and comfortable in, which is yourself. And that's a very important place to be. I mean, you do want to lay down at night and feel like, yeah, I'm actually okay with myself. I like myself. I love myself. It's a very peaceful place to be, and it's also a very empowering place to be. And if you turn all those 6 keys for yourself, you do have the ability then to harness this inner potential that may have been dormant before, and turn your life into something that you create, where you are the leader of your life.
Now, how does the subconscious mind play a role in all of these changes?
Well, in order to get to the subconscious, we have to learn to talk to the subconscious. That's the beauty about the subconscious. It is actually a good listener. Now, it just doesn't understand all our languages. So when we are, hammering our affirmations down every morning, but in the back of our head, we are telling ourselves, I don't really believe that, it's not going to happen. Well, the subconscious only hears the second part. It only hears what we are feeling, because the language of the subconscious is much more our feelings, our sensations, what we visualize in our head. And we know, for example, from athletes that, a football player, they go through the same move 100 times in their head. They're not even doing it only in the field. They're sitting at home and just imagining the throw, imagining this, specific strategy. And so the subconscious takes it in until it's automatic, or like some kind of a instrument. If you play piano, at some point you're not really thinking about which key to hit. It's just the subconscious moving your fingers. And so that is just the same thing, where the subconscious, when it really gets trained to understand how we want to respond to the temptation of procrastination, for example, and if it knows, okay, no, we are turning on the key of self-reliance. When we do this with the right way, with the right language, with conscious subconscious collaboration, how I call it, then the subconscious says, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. It just never gets told. The subconscious, like you said at the beginning, it takes on these patterns from our childhood because it has to, because the conscious mind is not very developed. So it just says, okay, I'll take over here. And unless someone tells the subconscious what to do differently, it just keeps on doing the same thing. And we never learn in school or college or anywhere how to speak with the subconscious. And this is why I believe Einstein said that most people only use 10% of their capacity. All these other 90% are somehow still stuck in these patterns that we have to change.
Yes, I think a lot of people go into autopilot. I think
that's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's rather interesting with anxiety and various things. If somebody experiences a traumatic experience, is that something that the subconscious mind absorbs and then reacts to any particular triggers? Is that's where it's stored versus the conscious mind?
Very much so. I mean, yes, it can be stored in the conscious mind too. But the problem is when you do talk about this, what happened to you consciously, you analyze it, you get it off your chest, you rationalize it, the trauma may still be inside of you. This is why so many people say, well, I have been seeing a therapist for a long time, but somehow I'm still having these nightmares. And the reason is that it never really got deep enough into the subconscious. It never really healed on that core place. And then there are people that have never had a memory of their abuse, for example, of that trauma, until something triggers them. They see something on TV, or they have a chiropractic appointment, and all of a sudden they have this spontaneous memory coming up, like the cellular memory that got reawakened. So yes, there's definitely a lot that the trauma can get a hold of on a subconscious level. But the next thing that happens is that the subconscious says, oh, whoa, that's tough. I don't know if we are safe here. I don't know if we are unconditionally loved and accepted. And so then the subconscious creates some kind of a belief system to just say, this is how we can avoid it. And the belief system can be, well, it's not safe to be loud or to be visible. You only get in trouble, so you better be quiet. Or you always need to please your parents, otherwise you're going to get spanked like your sibling. Or you have to really just avoid uncomfortable failure, because that's where you definitely get this look from your teacher, and that makes you feel like totally embarrassed. And so all those beliefs, or you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, so why even try? Those beliefs are early on responses to more or less difficult or traumatic experiences, and they can shape your life forever until you change them, because the beliefs create then these survival patterns, and they are stuck in this autopilot mode, and you're feeling like, well, that's who I am. Sorry, I can't change anymore. Well, guess what? Even if you're 70 or 80, you can still change. It's never too late. It's just a matter of really getting in touch with that subconscious that has, by the way, two modes. It's like, a car going forward and backwards. So the one mode is that it wants to protect you. That's why these survival patterns and beliefs and anxiety are all from the subconscious. But the second mode is that it wants to make you happy and fulfilled. Now, if the subconscious thinks you're not safe and you're still like a little child that is stuck in the trauma, well, it's going to focus more on safety. But if you're teaching the subconscious that you are safe and that you can take care of yourself and that you don't have to hold on to these patterns and beliefs anymore, it actually can then shift gears and look more for things that bring you more joy and purpose, which is exactly what happened with me when I shifted out of my anxiety and limiting beliefs of not being good enough and having to prove myself all the time. When I actually shifted out of them, I was able to look for what's really making me excited and passionate. What's really my purpose here? And that's why we're talking.
You actually talk about brain rewiring methods. And this is based on what? Neuro-linguistic programming. Is there a way to kind of describe this for listeners that isn't too complicated, but it makes sense?
Well, brain rewiring basically means that you are having a strong impact, that you're really getting basically a strong emotion for something. For example, if you realize the importance of not lying to yourself, if you realize how much damage you have created, coming back to the procrastination, by lying to yourself and then covering yourself up, your own lies, with the people that you actually care about, where you pretend and say, oh yeah, sure, I took care of it, or I will, and then it never happens. When you realize the pain that it caused you, and then you realize that you have options, and the options, for example, would be to see ahead of you the two choices right before you go about procrastination. You see the left path, literally as if you would be a fork in the road, the left path going down the road of procrastination, and you can see and visualize these are the consequences, know it, done it, pretty painful. And then you see the right path and all the consequences of you actually doing the discomfort or this, scary job that you just don't want to do. But then you're saying, no, I said it, I will do it, I have a plan for it, and I'll just follow through with it. And you see the ripple effect. What happens in your brain is you have literally created a choice between left or right. And just having a choice in itself is a new learning, and that creates a new neural network. It gets you out of autopilot, and it gets you at least to the place where you can either click to the right or click to the left. And that in itself is empowering.
This takes practice, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it took practice from us, from crawling to walking and standing, or even from babbling to talking. Yes, we are not fast. We are not like, Amazon, click and you get it tomorrow. It takes time. And this is the thing that I always find so important for people to understand. The mind is what really runs your life. It's not your body, but most people are more concerned about their body and what they're eating and working out than working their mind. Yes, it's great to have a healthy body. It's very important, but mental health is crucial for your happiness. You can have the most trim and fit body and you can just have the best diet in the world, but if you're miserable in your head, your whole life is miserable. So working with your mind should be as normal and as much of a commitment as you're working with your body, and also what you put into your mind. We are avoiding the things that are really not good for us physically. Well, what if we are avoiding junk thoughts or, avoiding to do things that we know later on create negative emotions? What if we are also feeding our mind with more positive things?
People do self-sabotage, for sure.
All the time, including myself. We all do it.
I've read that actually can affect your health. The body listens to the brain and the mind.
Yes, definitely. Imagine just like when you do self-sabotage and then you have some emotion. Let's say you do have more stress. And we all know that stress releases these stress hormones. And we all know that stress hormones increase blood pressure, your heart rate goes up, your blood flow changes, you're creating more cholesterol, you are creating more inflammation inside of you. It can go all the way to cancer. There was a study, well, granted that it was not totally proven, but there was a study that suggested, and I actually believe that being angry is a greater risk factor for cancer than smoking. Think about that.
Well, it does a lot of things in the body that are not healthy, for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
You're always in fight, flight.
Right. Right.
And that sort of thing, produces things like prostaglandins that can cause inflammation and pain and various other things. And yeah, if you're under stress and you're angry, all of those things are not going to be good for you in any way. And certainly our listeners, just by the very nature of their job, they're under stress constantly. They have to be constantly aware and anticipating what the other guy's doing on the road. So you don't want to add anger to that either.
It's a very stressful job. And it's also a job that I can imagine often leaves you powerless, or you often feel like stuck in traffic, or you're dealing with a deadline that's impossible to keep, or you're dealing with customers that are only difficult. And so the stress you're under and the stress your mind is under naturally gets you more into a fight or flight response. You're probably often living in this survival mode. And that's why it is so important to really do your inner work so that your outer world is not running your life, that you still, with all the stress, are able to choose, how do I want to respond to it? What's really important to me? What's the version of my best self right now who can let this roll off the back or can have good boundaries or at least a really good self-care program?
Take the high road, if you will. In driver speak,
yes.
It's a metaphor that would make sense. We do have to go to break here, Dr. Friedemann. I'm talking with Dr. FriedemannSchaub. He's the author of The Empowerment Solution. We're talking about the power of the subconscious mind and how to make some positive changes. Stay tuned for more great information coming up right here on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. The Truckers Network helps professional drivers save money and makes their lives easier. We were created for drivers by a commercial driver. We know the industry and driver needs. A Truckers Network membership offers exclusive discounts through our trusted partners on things like truck care, truck parking, tires, oil changes, fuel additives, fitness, roadside assistance, first aid kits, driver training, and a whole lot more. Start saving today. Check us out at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. That's app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson, and I'm talking with Dr. FriedemannSchaub. He's the author of The Empowerment Solution. We've been talking about taking control of our subconscious minds and making positive change. Dr. Friedemann, you said you had a tip for our listeners while they're out doing their job.
Yeah, we just talked about stress and all those pressures that you're all dealing with. And one thing that I found is really helpful is to listen to your inner radio station and just be aware of what am I telling myself. And what's so interesting is when you're actually starting to listen to yourself and maybe even write down or talk in your phone three negative thoughts a day, thoughts that you may have not really paid attention to, then you realize, wow, I am actually pretty harsh to myself and I need to turn this around. And no wonder that I'm so stressed listening to how I catastrophize or how I judge myself. And then the next thing you're going to do is to turn all those negative thoughts simply into questions. Oh, am I going to lose my job? Will I really lose my job? Oh, I'm going to be, late at home and my spouse is going to be mad at me. Will she really be mad at me? When you're turning it around, all of a sudden you are much more the one who's going to give an answer because you have been asking a question than having this statement like truth tellers for the future. And it just shifts totally your energy. And again, it takes your power back into your hands.
I like that. Where do people find you, Dr. Friedemann?
Best way is to go to the website, drfriedman.com. It's DR and then FRIEDEMAN.com. It's like the German spelling of Friedemann. And I also have a podcast, The Empowerment Solution. You can find me on YouTube and all the social media outlets.
And people can get your book and any kind of resource materials on your website as well?
Absolutely. Definitely. There are free gifts and empowerment tools. And yeah, my books are there. And there's also very soon a from anxiety to empowerment webinar that I'm offering starting in May.
Excellent. Thank you so very much for being on the show. This has been extremely informative. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more great programming coming up. Thank you for listening to another great interview on tncradio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on tncradio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of tncradio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast of the Truckers Network radio show.